Resuming debate, the honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government firmly believes that a Canada-EU comprehensive economic trade agreement will lead to increased prosperity in Canada, will create good-paying jobs, and will strengthen the middle class. Most importantly, it will do so in a fair and responsible way. I believe that we can all agree that opening up new markets has the potential to increase Canadian wealth. Our country's small and medium-sized enterprises, which make up the majority of Canada's exporters, are looking for our government to open up new markets, and our government is committed to this goal. SMEs employ some 10 million Canadians, or nearly 90% of Canada's total private sector workforce. And these are businesses that can benefit most from better access in international markets secured through free trade agreements. Stakeholders from across the country and a wide range of economic sectors continue to tell us to help them to grow. New export sales improve economies of scale, thereby reducing risk, lowering cost, and increasing profits. In my riding of Fundy Royal in New Brunswick, SMEs will benefit significantly from CETA. The EU is already New Brunswick's second largest export destination and fourth largest trading partner. This agreement will eliminate tariffs on almost all of New Brunswick's key exports, in addition to opening up new market opportunities. Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick's fish and seafood sector is a vibrant and diversified industry. Eliminating tariffs on value-added goods like cooked and peeled shrimp, frozen cod fillets, and processed crab and lobster will make these goods more competitive in the EU, allowing New Brunswick processors to sell more of their goods and create new jobs. By opening new markets and increased access within the EU, Canada's world-class fish and seafood industry will have a competitive advantage with CETA that will benefit workers in the fish and seafood sector from coast to coast, including workers in New Brunswick's exceptional fish industry. Of the EU's more than 9,000 tariff lines, approximately 98% will be duty-free for Canadian goods when CETA comes into force. Almost all of the remaining tariff lines will be eliminated when the agreement is fully implemented. This will translate into increased profits and market opportunities for Canadian businesses of all sizes, in all sectors, and in every part of the country. CETA will provide Canadian companies with a first-mover advantage in the EU market over competitors from markets like the US that do not have a trade agreement in place with the EU. It will allow Canadian businesses to establish customer relationships, networks, and joint projects first. CETA also offers Canadian SMEs the opportunity to be part of a broader global supply chain anchored in the EU. One of the most important complements to creating these advantageous conditions for our SMEs is to encourage companies to pursue these new opportunities aggressively. Our government is committed to developing trade agreement implementation plans to help Canadian businesses take advantage of the opportunities that flow from these agreements. Because our government realizes that some Canadian businesses aren't aware of the potential opportunities provided by CETA, plans have been developed to promote recently concluded agreements with SMEs specifically in mind. As a small business owner, I know personally that SMEs often lack the time and resources to inform themselves of game-changing international business developments such as free trade agreements. As a result, they may not pursue advantages created by the agreements. The promotion of new FTAs follows a common three-part approach. First of all, we are ensuring the information is available through the web and information seminars for business audiences organized with provincial, territorial, and private sector partners. We have recently launched a new CETA webpage geared toward Canadian businesses, which links to information on export opportunities by sectors and member state, explains the public procurement processes in the EU, provides a detailed guide to doing business in the EU, provides information, events, and testimonials from businesses which have already had success in the EU, as well as a guide to finding tariff rate for Canadian goods. Eventually, an FTA tariff finder will provide tariff information for all of Canada's FTA partners. We are also undertaking proactive initiatives to reach out to Canadian businesses across the country and from our missions within the EU in cooperation with our provincial partners, and as well as Export Development Canada and the Business Development Bank of Canada. We are launching a series of business outreach events featuring technical experts in CETA who can advise business participants in details about CETA's provisions and market access improvements that it brings. Secondly, we are ensuring that we are ensuring through training that our team supporting international business development, be they our trade commissioners in Canada or abroad, other federal government departments or agencies, or our provincial and territorial partners, are fully familiar with the free trade agreements so that they can advise clients of the opportunities that they bring. The Canadian Trade Commissioner Service has 26 points of service based on in our diplomatic missions in the EU to support Canadian businesses wanting to access the market. They offer invaluable assistance to those wanting to do so through market advice and intelligence. Earlier, in 2016, we began building the capacity of our trade commissioners to advise their business clients on CETA through training sessions on the agreement. Thirdly, following a detailed assessment, we will work with specialized industry associations in identified priority sectors to increase the interest and knowledge amongst exporters. This more focused, hands-on approach should lead to higher export in these high-opportunity areas. We've consulted with a number of sectoral business associations to explore the development of sectoral strategies which would identify actions needed to be taken by private sector to advance export growth. This is in addition to the sources of assistance from all levels of support for trade missions and trade fairs, market intelligence from the Trade Commissioners Network, as well as programs from other government agencies to support product development or expansion capacity. This more intensive engagement with firms to help them pursue opportunities generated by free trade agreements is what we term FTA aftercare. Consultations with private sector are continuing, and a limited number of sectors will be identified to develop a pilot approach. The promotion of CETA's benefits to the Canadian business community is very much the government's priority given the range of opportunities which the EU and its market of more than 500 million consumers offer. We recognize that the EU market, despite its size and the significant market access improvements CETA delivers, requires a considerable degree of preparation for exporters, particularly to those that are new SMEs. CETA is indeed the most progressive trade agreement ever negotiated. It will lead to increased prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic, create good-paying jobs, and help strengthen the middle class. This agreement clearly provides the advantages that our industries are seeking in expanding their footprint internationally, and does so in a fair and responsible manner that will benefit the Canadian society as a whole. This is why it's so important for Canada to implement the CETA agreement as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to thank my colleague for comments about the importance of trade, and particularly as it relates to the agricultural sector. We on this side have been standing up for the agricultural sector, whether that's the beef and pork or the grain and oilseeds. And one of my concerns, Mr. Speaker, is that while we're providing opportunity for trade, our government, when we were in government, made it clear that we would support the dairy sector and the fishery sector through some specific investments to protect them. I'm just wondering if my colleague could comment on whether or not they are totally committed to continuing the support that we promised to the dairy sector and also to the Fisheries Investment Fund that will help the Newfoundland and Labrador fisheries. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Fundy Royal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague across the way for his question and for his commitment to the dairy industry. I think this government has been very clear that we're very invested in the dairy industry and its success. I recently had the opportunity to meet with dairy farmers in my riding in Fundy Royal and talk about what the future looked like. And I can tell you that I was very proud that they are very focused on the future of the industry and looking at measures that will strengthen the industry. In fact, they're very pleased with the investment that this government has committed to in $250 million for producers and another $100 million for processors. These are the very things that will improve the dairy industry in Atlantic Canada, and I'm pleased with the moves that we're making.
Questions and comments. Commentaire. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
The member for her speech. Mr. Speaker, she just mentioned dairy farmers. I too have spoken with the dairy farmers in Alberta, and they welcome that there will be some compensation. Unfortunately, it's far less than was promised during the election. They have two questions, though. One is, will this sum of money, $300 million, will that include the administration of the fund for the cost sharing? If so, they oppose that. It's already a meager amount of money, and they think it all should go to advancing the advancement of the sector? And secondly, when exactly is this money going to flow so that the dairy farmers are ready before this agreement comes into effect?
The honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Thank you to my honourable colleague for her question. And again, the interest in the dairy industry. As you know, or may know, Fundy Royal is considered the dairy centre of the Maritimes, and something that I am certainly very invested in as well. Like I said, the farmers absolutely were pleased that there is a level of commitment towards the dairy industry and progressing the industry in the future. The details of such haven't been forthcoming yet, but there certainly has been a show of goodwill. Over the last several months, the Minister has met with many stakeholders in the dairy industry, and they certainly are pleased that their concerns are being heard and addressed. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Moncton Riverview, Dieppe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my colleague from Fundy Royal for her wonderful presentation.
I'd also just like to take a few minutes to thank the minister responsible and his staff for the great work they did for some months and that they're continuing to do.
On the benefits that this will bring to her riding and especially the Atlantic area.
Honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague, my neighbour in New Brunswick. I spoke specifically in my speech about the impact that CETA will have on the fisheries industry, but it also will open up opportunities in forestry and wood products, agriculture and agri-food products, as well as professional services. And I think that's important to look at as well when we look at the EU procurement process, that we do have very strong professionals in Atlantic Canada that have services to offer, and I'm very excited for them and the opportunities that this does provide. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable colleague, when our colleague from Kitchener-Conestoga asked her specifically about dairy and fisheries and how that impact was going to be there, and if the government was going to fulfil the promise in terms of helping those industries transition through to see the opportunities with CETA, the honourable colleague from across the way completely ignored the fishery portion of that question. So I'm going to ask it again. The Liberal government has been in discussions with the Atlantic provinces regarding a CETA investment fund for the fisheries communities in Atlantic Canada. Will the government fulfill their commitment to the Atlantic provinces for the changes they've made to their processing ventures or requirements?
The honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleague for his question. I certainly didn't intend to ignore the fisheries industry. In fact, most of my speech was focused on the fisheries industry. And what I want to focus on is the opportunities that this provides for them, especially in value-added areas. I talked about frozen and processed shrimp and cod, as well as lobster. So I think these are all very important market opportunities that cannot be overlooked. Thank you.